to our edits. Boom, just so you know.
Cool.
All right, man. So, hey, welcome to the Veteran Wealth Podcast. Just one more episode for you guys out there. This podcast was created and developed this year for veterans, learning how to transition out of military, and even sometimes years after transitioning out of military, learning how to transition into civilian life and creating business, wealth, and health for themselves. So today I have David with me. David is transitioning out of the Marine Corps right now, going into the reserves, which we're catching him at that prime spot right now. And so thanks for doing this podcast for me. I greatly appreciate it 1,000,000%, man.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Exactly. And so let me ask you a question. How long have you been in the Marine Corps?
Right now, just about 13 years.
13 years. What made you want to transition into becoming a reservist and going a different route?
A lot of things played into it, actually. But long story short, about 5 years ago, I started buying real estate. I just kind of kept buying real estate. And then I started talking about buying real estate. And about a year ago, well, about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess I re-enlisted and I was like, okay, cool. And I just wasn't feeling as fulfilled. I mean, when we first joined the Marine Corps, right, we were traveling the world, we were blowing stuff up, we were going to Afghanistan, I just missed Iraq, but, doing all the fun stuff. And the more I got promoted and the more conflict went away, it was like office job to office job. The adventure itch wasn't there. I wasn't getting the adventure scratched. I wasn't getting the travel scratched. I was just not as fulfilled in some of those things in my life reasons I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And I was just not super happy. And I started talking to some friends, and a buddy of mine, Doug Nordman, who's like a huge influence in like the military personal finance world, retired guy, was like, the one thing I wish someone had told me when I was about halfway through my time in the military was about the reserves. And he kind of sat me down and talked to me about the reserves. And he's like, I gutted out the last 7-8 years of my time in the military. I was not happy. And if I'd known about the reserves, I would have done it. And the more I started looking into it, the more I was like, man, that's pretty cool, but I don't know if I'm going to be okay. And over the last year, I kind of hit a point where my income through everything else I was doing kind of equaled what the Marine Corps was paying. And I was like, I owe it to myself to take this and go see what I can find on the other side. And so the reserves is kind of my safety net. If everything else falls apart, I can get back in on active duty through recruiting or something. But I mean, that's the kind of the long and short of it.
So you said something interesting that not a lot of people know of or even dare to do. You said while you were in the military, you started to invest in property. So tell me a little bit about what did you do to create income outside of the military that is now equivalent to a 13-year, Marine Corps veteran?
Yeah, I started with a duplex. I bought the strategy is called house hacking, but you buy a duplex, you live in like one unit, you rent out the other unit to kind of pay out your mortgage. So I went from living, this was in Missouri when I was a recruiter. So I went from paying like $550 a month for a 2-bed, 1-bath apartment to owning a duplex, and the mortgage was like $615. So it was like $65 more to own the duplex, but I had a tenant paying $450. So really I was out of money less every month to own the building than I had been to rent this apartment. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I got orders to Hawaii. And when I moved to Hawaii, I rented the unit I'd been living in. And all of a sudden this duplex was paying me, $300 a month to own it. And at first I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I started reading some more books about what I was doing. And I was like, man, this can scale. Like if I took that 300 and saved it, and then also saved some money, then I could buy another one. And then it would be $600 a month. And then, so that was kind of the plan, was buy a duplex and buy another duplex or single family. And what ended up happening was about 1.5 years after I bought the duplex, I'd been saving money. And I sent out some letters to people who own duplexes saying, hey, this is me. I'd like to buy some, maybe you buy your property. If you're thinking about selling, let me know. And some guy was like, well, I don't want to sell my duplex, but I have a 10-unit apartment. And
wow,
scared the crap out of me. I was not ready to make a jump from, one property into 10 units. And I was just lucky enough to have surrounded myself with some people who'd been investing a little bit longer than me. And I basically ran it by them after I did some math and said, this looks like it would work. What do you guys think? and none of them saw any red flags. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just being scared. Let's go for it. So I bought the 10 unit, and then, I did a lot of other stuff. I tried, I partnered on a flip in Hawaii. I tried flipping a house in Missouri and lost like 30 grand, just because the contractor I used, he went out of business. And I guess my money was what he used to exit the business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I had some rough experiences, but then, so about that 10 unit, and then I just kind of started, it kind of scales from there. Then you're able to save a little bit more money and a little bit more money, until right now. Up until about 2 months ago, I owned 19 rentals, and then we took over a hotel last April 5th, and we close on 39 more apartment units on Tuesday. So I will own 96 rentals. 40 units are a hotel, and then the remaining, whatever that math is, 59 are long-term rentals. And then throughout that, I kind of started blogging about what I was doing and YouTubing. And so YouTube pays me a little bit. And then I just kind of created some stuff around a community where I was able to help other vets out and other people learn how to use the VA loan. And that doesn't necessarily pay me super well, but it's, it kind of offsets. And the real estate's the main piece. I mean, through the real estate, once we get this hotel up and running, I'll be making more money through rental income than I ever was in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So let me ask you, why you said a couple of things that I want to touch on. One of the things you said was that, you lost 30 grand on a flip and so forth and so on. The majority of people, like, 30 grand is a lot of daggone money, right? So, most people would back off at that point and say, look, this is for me. I can't run risk. Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I mean, you got to figure out why you lost the money, right? So I look at it as a couple of different things. One, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who spent way more than $30,000 on a college degree and never did anything with it. So I kind of jokingly, I call it tuition when I lost that much money. I was like, oh, I learned something from that. It'll teach me a lot. But the reality was, like, I look back on it and it wasn't a foreseeable risk. And it's not a risk it was a very avoidable risk. I did a few things wrong. But also I wasn't personally there to check on the property, which I don't think matters, but I didn't have somebody else checking on it. So I had a property manager, but I didn't bother her to say, hey, can you go by and check on this property? So I was just taking the guy's word blind, which was stupid. And he had some stuff going on. In fact, he ended up, unfortunately, I don't think he's, from what I understand, he's no longer with us, kind of his own doing, because he had a really, like, a whole bunch of stuff just kind of happened at the same time. And so when he went under, he took 3 or 4 other investors that I know who had personally recommended this guy to me, and he lost all their money too. So it was kind of a bad situation all the way around. But I was able to look at it objectively and realize, like, well, that was an avoidable thing. And, like, I'm still making money on these other investments. So, like, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. So most people are going to pay, 30 grand a year on a tuition in college. You did it in a few months, right? You picked up a very valuable lesson. Not that anyone wants to learn that lesson, but it wasn't a failure for you. I think that's one of the things I want to point out. It was an educational moment.
Yeah, I bought that property for $12,000. I put around 45 or 48 into it. I think it was about 62,000 all into it. And then I was able to sell it for 31. So yeah, huge, but it is what it is. If there's plenty of things to be learned from it. I mean, the long story short is just, as much as we hate the phrase in the military, trust but verify. If I had just had somebody going by the property to double check what he said was done before I sent the payment for the next bit of work, never would have happened. I might have been out $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah. So lesson learned. So let me ask you another question. Why do you think most people, let's call it, I say most people, because at this point right now, this question is most people, not just most veterans. Yeah. But if we could tie it down, why do you think most people and most veterans don't do what you did? Why do you think most people don't go buy that first duplex or take the risk on a 10-unit apartment complex or forget the 10 unit, like just go from one duplex to another like you had originally planned? Why do you think people are not trying to build wealth in that sense?
I don't think everybody knows about it. It's not as widely televised as we, would like to see. I don't think everybody's out there. I don't think it's like a, hey, here's this awesome option. Oh, that's not for me. I'm going to go this way. I just think a lot of people don't talk about it. And then the other thing is when people get in any business, when people get into a specific niche, a lot of times they listen to people who haven't done it. So I have this thing in the book I'm about to release. I have one of the things I say is like, don't take advice from people who haven't achieved what you want to achieve, right? And so that even if the person has the same kind of goals you do, they haven't achieved what you're looking for, like, okay, maybe their advice isn't half bad, but take it with a grain of salt because they're not where you want to be. And when I really started to kind of scale in life, I started surrounding myself with people who had both similarly aligned goals and already achieved or been through things that I was looking for. So what happens a lot of times is people get this great idea. They hear about buying a fourplex online and they're like, I could live in one unit, I could rent the other three, I could live for free in this house. This is so awesome. And then they go and ask their mom or their sister or their baby daddy or whoever. And that person is like, oh, why would you want to live next to other people? Or, oh, that sounds too good to be true. Or, no, you shouldn't do that. You should buy this mansion. You can afford, for that amount of money, you can afford this mansion over here. Like, why would you want to live in that crummy thing? And then they, they get sucked into either not doing anything or doing the wrong thing or whatever, because they're listening to somebody who they might have their best interest at heart, but they've never done what that person's looking to do.
Yeah.
And, they don't know what they're talking about.
Or we say the have-nots or the achieve-nots, right? Like it just, I agree with you 100%. And, I'm glad you brought that up because I think the message here is most of the time your closest advocates could be your worst adversaries. You know what I mean? Like, these are people you love and trust, and you trust them with everything in your life. You'll leave your kids with them if you're going out on date night with the wife or whatever the case is. But you go to them for advice on something like this and they tell you, no, man, that's too risky or that's too scary, or, and they're just, they're pushing their own fears on you, I think, so you said you're in the process of releasing a book. Congratulations. Definitely send me the link to that book because I would love to get it out there for everybody to pick up. I think it's, you're hitting the nail on the head when you say the information, it's just not as widely televised, but it is available, right? Yeah. Like I can't realistically, and I get frustrated sometimes because, I look at my kids ask me a question and, we used to have this belief that there's no such thing as a dumb question, but sometimes it's nowadays Google's at your fingertips. Like they got all the devices in the world. So you can just about Google anything, Yeah. And it doesn't mean all the information is correct. It just means do your due diligence, right? Like don't trust the first thing you read about 10 articles on the same thing or watch 15 videos on YouTube because YouTube just, man, look, I might be dating myself here, but I remember having to like change a part of a car and get the big ass book and like go step by step on the book and read diagrams. Now you just watch a YouTube video and put it on pause until you get to the next step, and there are people out there just giving you, flooding you with information like you're doing, so I think it's how can we as a community, as a military community, how can we reach out to active duty folks and say, hey, this is what you should be doing?
Yeah, I mean that's the tough one, right? So I've been trying to crack that nut now I started my blog 3.5 years ago, and I've been trying. So the hardest part is, like you said, it's all there, right? Like if you Google military millionaire, like my ugly fucking mug will pop up on images, right? Like I'm there. Hey, come find me, come talk to me. But the problem is the people who need to hear that aren't looking for it. They're still stuck in like, oh, let me go buy a new car and get hammered and blow my paycheck because it's the 15th mode, which, I've been there, done that way too much.
Yeah, and we all have. For sure.
Yeah. And so I think it needs to be a cultural thing. It needs to start, the best thing we could probably do would be if we could find a way to change like the culture coming out of boot camp to be a little bit more like they touch on the TSP, but they don't. Sorry, can you hear me? I
Yep.
got a
Gotcha.
phone call from a spammer and it said it muted the Zoom call. God, I love being on a cell phone because my office is in a crate being shipped across country. And so like I think that's a huge piece is if we could figure out how to get like at the very entry level into the military, start kind of cultivating some of that, like, look, hey, if you do this with your thrift savings plan and save this much a month, like basic stuff. And there are a lot of financial resources and there's a financial education center on base, but the problem is like person has to be looking for that information. I was a command financial specialist and the only people who came and talked to me were the people who like the sergeant who walks in and says, hey, my lance corporal did this really stupid thing, can you fix him? It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, but it's a little too late for me now. So I was actively trying to give classes to my unit. And even at that level, like I was lucky enough, I had a colonel who was really on board and gave me some support. And so I did have 1 or 2 classes where I had like almost the entire command to talk through some basic stuff. But outside of that, like until he showed up, I wasn't no traction. I would hold like a lunch meet and greet in the cafeteria and have like 2 Marines in the entire unit show up because none of their commanders, like nobody even thought it was worth mentioning because who cares about learning about finance? Like, they can learn that on their own. So it's like a cultural thing. It needs to come top down that they need to, and not like some mandatory training, but just like the leadership needs to acknowledge that there's a lot of advantages to service members, especially at an early age. And rather than saying, well, the opportunity is there if they want it, because even, if a Lance Corporal says, hey, Sergeant, I want to go to the education center and learn about, take this personal finance course, he's going to go, was it on lunchtime? Is it after work? Well, then, pound sand. So we just change the cultural demeanor there to where it's like, hey, once you hit your unit, you should go to this class once, right? Like, and just get it
Yeah.
into his head. I think that would be a huge
And get
thing.
yourself right. Yeah, 100%. I think question
And I
is
think
how
if the
do we get there?
military,
And I think yeah, I just look inbound while you're active. I always joke about, you have to do math for Marines, right? Which is like the simplest math in the planet. But what if we did like investing for Marines or TSP for Marines, like where they actually had to take a course, whether it was self-study or whatever the case is, to truly understand what it is they're contributing to every month, right?
yeah,
And what that could mean to them over a 20, 25, 30-year career,
exactly.
So definitely on board with you on that, man. I wish that we could culturally change it from the top down and really push it forward and do it from the very beginning to help veterans create wealth while they're in, so that they can come out in better positions instead of coming out with the massive debt that they got at the PX or with their star card or or Navy Federal, right? Because Navy Federal just give you credit cards and car loans and everything else, and then
Yeah.
they'll, you're late one time and they cut you off forever, and Navy Fed has a long memory, so so you could be 50 years old thinking about, let me check with Navy Fed and see if I can get a car loan, and they'll say if you messed up with them in the past, and listen, I'm speaking from experience, um, so I want to thank you for this. I think we've reached our time limit, but I want to thank you for this and thank you for this time. And it's a great opportunity to talk to somebody who's doing it and doing it well. If you gave one piece of advice to veterans that are active, separating or separated from the military, what would you say to them?
Ooh, there's a lot to give, but I think the biggest thing I would say is learn about your VA loan and learn how to utilize it, because I think that's probably the fastest way to shortcut your path to wealth, especially if you house hack. If you use a VA loan to buy a 2, 3, or 4 unit, you live in one unit and you rent out some of the others. Because no matter where you live in the country, generally your biggest expense is housing. And if you can find a way to just cut that expense out, and then instead of blowing that money, take that little bit of money, whether it's $500 a month or $1,500 a month or $3,000 a month in San Diego, and you're able to save whatever you were going to be spending on housing anyway, and then invest that, or even just save it while you learn about investing. I mean, that's probably the fastest way you can skyrocket your path to wealth. I lived in San Diego for the last 2 years, and my mortgage was $3,000, and I made $2,400 a month through Airbnb bedrooms. So I paid $1,600, and the other $2,400 a month bought me like 10 units out here. So
guys, man, listen up, sacrifice the times, and so that you won't have to in the future. I mean, this is your opportunity right now, especially all you single veterans out there who have an opportunity to live off base, who are allowed to live off base. Use your VA loan and learn about your VA loan. Reach out to Navy Fed, reach out to a buddy who's a realtor, reach out to us. We'll point you in the right direction. But use your VA loan, learn about it. It is your biggest wealth weapon, period, in the story. While you're in, after you're out. I mean, I know folks that have been out for years and years and years and years and never, ever once used a VA loan. And so, and just because they've got an idiot realtor who tells them, hey, this is not the right loan. You don't want to do this. This is, you got to try, no one's going to accept your offer, blah, 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 blah. Yet somehow I've got a ton of clients who are veterans, a ton of clients who use their VA loan because I pushed them to do it. And somehow they buy houses. So, so, hey man, thanks for your time. I appreciate you. Semper Fi. And, everything you do, keep driving, keep pushing forward, and keep in touch with us so that, we can catch you, down the road and do this again, and let us know when your book comes out. Maybe we'll do this and promote the book.
Sounds good, brother. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You too, man.